Can you hear me okay? Good. It's a great honor to introduce our speaker tonight, Frank Holleman. Frank is a great friend and to the Native Plant Society. We go back many, many years from one of our plant sales out on Church Street. I can't remember how many years ago that was. But Frank is, when you define, the conservation and the conservation heroes, there's no more taller person than Frank Holleman. And we're grateful to have Frank speak to us tonight. So I'll read a little bit of his bio. Frank Holleman is president of the Naturaland Trust and a senior attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center. Naturaland Trust has worked for 50 years to protect South Carolina's Blue Ridge Mountains and special places in the Piedmont. At the Southern Environmental Law Center, Frank's work on clean water, clean energy, and projects and coordinates Southern Environmental Law Center's coal ash work across the Southeast. Frank has served for years on the board of the Upstate chapter of the South Carolina Native Plant Society and was recently elected vice president of our society. He is the recipient of the Environmental Awareness Award for the state of South Carolina in 2010 and the Harriet Kesserly Conservation Advocacy Award from the Conservation Voters of South Carolina in 2016, and the Carl F. Cohort Distinguished Alumni Award from the Permian University Alumni Association in 2018. Frank and his wife live in Greenville, and they have 3 children and 5 grandchildren. Again, we are so honored to have Frank speak to us tonight. So welcome, Frank. Thank you.
Well, good evening. It's a real honor to be introduced to my friend and a true hero, founder of the society, Rick Huffman, and thank Pam and Heather for all their work for the society and getting us here tonight. So I was asked to speak about a combination. One, this is the 50th anniversary of Naturaland Trust. So I want to take the opportunity to talk to you about it, and particularly how we at Naturaland Trust have worked with the Native Plant Society, and also to talk about the advocacy and litigation work that the Southern Environmental Law Center and the Native Plant Society have done together, and to talk about how those things come together and how we've had some great results in recent years. So first, I want you to look at this picture. It's on the screen. These are South Carolina's Blue Ridge Mountains, and that is the mission statement of Naturaland Trust. That's it, right? Naturaland Trust was created 50 years ago by a true visionary. And let me see if I can make the system work right.
One extra click that I always forget about. Okay, now try.
Tommy White was an attorney in Greenville. He was a great hiker and outdoorsman. And 50 years ago, lived in Greenville, came back to Greenville, worked in his father's law firm in Greenville. And Tommy is the guy who's responsible for what you see in downtown Greenville. That was his vision, his ideas. He assembled it all. He came up with the idea for the pedestrian bridge, the Hyatt Hotel, the Falls development, and his wife was a leader for Falls Park. So this is the man you can thank, in my opinion, for everything you see about downtown Greenville. But his heart was in the outdoors. He was a great hiker. And 50 years ago, he went to Los Angeles, California, and saw the hill. If you've been to LA, saw the hills outside LA, and they are just totally junked up and developed. And he said, if we don't do something, the Blue Ridge Mountains outside of Greenville could look just the same way. So he came back. That's why Naturaland Trust is 50 years old, and started what he thought was the first land trust in South Carolina in 1973, but actually one had been started in Beaufort a couple of years before. But it was a brand new concept. He looked it up, he started it, and he used it as his tool, this nonprofit, to help protect the Blue Ridge Mountains. So Tommy, for those of you who are new here, and for many who've lived here for a long time, through Naturaland Trust, he has created Caesar's Head State Park, Jones Gap State Park. He protected Raven Cliff Falls. It was for sale as a hotel site. Cecil Andrews, who was the Secretary of the Interior under Jimmy Carter, flew here and delivered $1 million check to help buy that. Bald Rock Heritage Trust Reserve, Chestnut Ridge Heritage Trust Reserve. The concept of the Jocassee Gorges was his idea. A whole the Blue Wall Preserve he assembled in Landry, using Naturaland Trust as a nonprofit vehicle to accomplish all those things. That's what he saw in LA. And that's what woke him up. And that's what he came back to protect. This is the ad for Raven Cliff Falls, the for sales brochure that was being distributed to sell it off as a development site. And that's what it looks like today. That's one of our, that's Jones Gap. That's a Ball Rock. That's another picture of the Jones Gap area. That's the Jocassee Gorges. So after Tommy, in the 2010s, Tommy began to age out, and he asked us to age in. And we had a period of transition, and he died in 2015. But we have taken up his challenge and charged forward with a vengeance. And I'll tell you just right now, today, this, we don't have a slide for this. We just closed on the acquisition of 1,090 acres on Highway 11, right as you cross the South Saluda River and enter Pickens County from Greenville. Runs along Highway 11 with Highway 11 as its southern border and the South Saluda River as its northern border. 1,090 acres. It has a complete panoramic view of the Blue Wall, from all the way from Table Rock over here to Caesar's Head past there. It's going to be eventually a DNR, South Saluda Wildlife Management Area. It will be open to all of us. I mean, that's a huge deal. Huge deal. And I can tell you, truthfully, it would not have happened without the work of Naturaland Trust. Now, it wouldn't have happened either without the funding from the Conservation Bank and DNR and the Office of Resiliency, which a lot of conservation groups, citizens, and others have helped create, fund, and support over the years. Nobody does everything single-handedly, but I can say Naturaland Trust was a critical component to be able to make that happen in a way that is harder for government agencies to do. And as a small nonprofit, we have one full-time employee and a volunteer board. We're able to act more quickly and more nimbly. But when Tommy, the last thing Tommy White did on conservation, as he was aging out, he did a brochure. And the brochure was to advocate for the acquisition of two things. One was the 9 times forest in Pickens County, south of Highway 11. The Nature Conservancy, you know, and we all worked on this, protected the 9 times preserve, which is 700 acres on Ed McPherson Road. Some people call it East. McDaniel Road, some people call it East, but that's E McDaniel's actually Ed Road in Pickens. But to the left, across the road from there, it was 1,648 acres owned by Crescent Resources. And Tommy did a brochure advocating for the conservation of that and conservation of an area called Tall Pines. It runs along the South Saluda at the base of Caesar's Head. Well, one of our first successes after Tommy aged out was the protection of 9 times. And how many people have hiked there? That is the view from Big Rock. And if you haven't, go out this weekend when the rain stops and hike to the top of that. It is the best view other than Sassafras Mountain, and it's more accessible in our area right now. You have a 360-degree view of all the foliage, if the rain didn't knock it all off, in Pickens, North Carolina, Oconee, Greenville County, right there. And that's the view from Big Rock. So we now own and have that. It's open to the public. We have a parking lot for mountain climbers. You can also hike in from the other side. And it's a tremendous area, as Rick knows, and as others can tell you, a great native plants. And I should say this, my theory is Naturaland Trust is the protector of the most native plants of anybody in the area because of all this acreage. There's a lot of native plants on 1,648 acres. It's a different view from the same property. Now this is the next property, Tommy, connected to Tommy's view of tall pines. That was going to be a big housing development. It was built by the major developer in the Myrtle Beach area, bought by them to develop a big housing development. And then it was a terrible thing, but a positive development of the Great Recession was it's kiboshed that possibility. And Brad Weich, Tommy's son, who's our vice president, negotiated the acquisition from the bank out of the financial situation, signed a contract, which we had no idea how we were going to pay for, to buy that entire tract. We ultimately assigned the contract to the Conservation Fund, and DNR and the Conservation Fund acquired that. That is now the Tall Pines Wildlife Management Area, which some of you may have hiked on out there. It's open. But then Naturaland, then the neighboring 800 acres owned by Packlet Milliken came up for sale. Naturaland Trust went out and borrowed the money, pledged some of our property to secure the debt, secured that property, and over time, with the help of one major donor, the Conservation Bank, and then ultimately DNR bought it from us. We now connect the South Saluda with the Middle Saluda, because that 800 acres connects Tall Pines with the Middle Saluda at Echo Valley. And that's one of our major trout fishing areas now. That's all publicly owned, all belongs to you. And it includes what we call Janie's Prairie. That was one of the big reasons we wanted to get it. Janie Marlowe discovered this prairie there under a power line on River Road. Is that what it's called? River Road, under Blue Ridge Electric's power line. And before we sold it, Bill Stringer, I had to get my bill straightened out. Bill Stringer, former president of this chapter and the state society, who might be out there on Zoom, I don't know. Bill looked at the soils, marked off the area of other prairie soils, and we clear cut those 17 acres so that we would, before we gave it to DNR, we wouldn't just have this linear prairie under the power line, but a full prairie. And DNR has now built the fire line and is going to burn that. And we're going to have a natural prairie there in the middle of this DNR area because of Janie's work and the society's work in maintaining that area. Your society, you may know, has bush hogged that to keep it from being sprayed for years in agreement with DNR, with Blue Ridge. That's part of the same area. That's another one of our big fights the society was involved in. That's Issaquena Falls, which everyone thought was public property, but it was on private property. It was not a public resource. And as a matter of a big fight with the Nature Conservancy, Upstate forever, the whole Upstate region, we fought off a development and ended up having that now encompassed a county park, city park, and a heritage trust reserve. That's Highway 11. One of the major projects. Highway 11 is a national scenic highway. Everybody know that? Yeah. Cherokee Foothills National Scenic Highway. Do you know what that means in terms of protecting it? Nothing. It means nothing. It's honorific title only. It's up to us if we're going to protect what we got. It does prevent some billboards, not all. And virtually, until recently, virtually nothing had ever been done to protect it. Pickens County has just taken a great step forward. But so what we have done, Naturaland Trust took up the campaign as Tommy aged out to protect the scenic values of Highway 11. And these stretches you see through Pickens County that look so wonderful, well, we own them. Naturaland Trust bought them. And or some of them have been conveyed to the state and they're part of the DNR Jocassee Gorges now. But that's why those areas are protected. This is a granitic bald along Highway 11. Now this is in the Greenville County portion near Caesar's Head, below Caesar's Head, and where the South Saluda runs. That's one of my favorite acquisitions we ever made. Is gorgeous granitic bald that has fantastic native plants on it. Also, we've been protecting our Native American heritage. One of the great things we did was, after years of work and negotiation, acquire the site of Oconee Town, which is next to Oconee Station in Oconee County. That is the Cherokee village name after which the county is named. We acquired it and got it to negotiate the acquisition, got the money. Conservation Bank helped us again. Oconee Conservation Bank helped with that, and we transferred it ultimately to the state park system. And this is the dedication ceremony we had in Walhalla with school children and the representatives of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee. And the man on the far right is the chief of the Eastern Band, came for the dedication. And what we are holding there is a wampum belt. That wampum belt was made to honor this acquisition by the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma and sent back to us as a token of appreciation for preserving what they call back home. And you can see that in the Museum of the Cherokee in South Carolina in Walhalla, which is established by the third guy from the right, Luther Locke. And this is most touching, maybe of all. The man in the middle is the late Jeremiah Wolf. He was then the most senior elder of the Eastern Band. He was at Omaha Beach on D-Day, and he was the only person in over 200 years to have been awarded by the Cherokee Nation or the Cherokee tribe the honorific title of Good Man. He has since died, but this was such a significant acquisition to them. The chief and the most honored member of the Cherokee tribe came to the dedication. That is our work to protect trout rivers in South Carolina. This is one of them on the South Saluda, the most accessible trout stream in the state, right on the Highway 11. For years, people fished in it, but they were trespassing. Now they're not trespassing. Over a period of years, we acquired that frontage and they can fish there. This is symbolic of our work to expand the state parks. This is Paris Mountain State Park. We've added 200 or more acres to Paris Mountain State Park, which is one of the most visited state parks in the state. But we've also done the same thing up at Jones Gap along River Road and elsewhere to the east, as well as to the right. That's some of the beauties of Jones Gap. And one of my favorite efforts we've made, y'all know what Burroughs Place is? Y'all remember the saloon on Highway 107 above Oconee State Park going to North Carolina? There was an old saloon there. It burned down. Burroughs called it Burroughs Place. Right behind it was a trout pond that old Mr. Burrow had built years that Mr. Burroughs long passed away. But he had built a trout pond, which was a fine thing for him. But the problem with that was at headwaters of a tributary Pigpen Creek, which flows into the Chattooga River. It is a historic brook trout stream that has a native population of brook trout in it, original genetic material. There are not many of those left in South Carolina. But this pond had compromised that stream. Because the pond, A, raises the temperature, B, keeps water out of the stream, and C, introduces alien species that are pond species around here, like chubs, but shouldn't be up there. Well, after watching it for 10 years, as a result of it's a long story, it's a novel, we managed to get our hands on that pond finally. And as of today, the dam has been removed, pond has been drained, it's growing up, temperature of the stream water has dropped. DNR captured all of the brook trout in the stream, took them to the Oconee fish hatchery, spawned fry, killed all the chubs in the stream, and now they have put the fry back in that stream. So we have restored, recreated several miles of native brook trout stream that was lost to South Carolina. That is, I mean, that's almost like saving the panda boat.
Yeah.
All right, huge deal. I can't overstate it. And those fish are, some of the fish aren't going back because they've gotten too fat to go back in that stream. Our streams don't support big trout. But they produced even more fry this year. So they're going to put more fry back in and some of the smaller fish and keep doing that. Y'all know what this is? This is the bunched arrowhead. This is our region for the Upstate chapter. This is our rarest plant. It's a federally endangered species. Lives only in a rare form of wetland. That rare form of wetland exists only in Greenville County, South Carolina, and in a few places across the border in North Carolina. That's it. That's the only place you find this plant. And agriculture, development, and other things over time have almost wiped it out, but there are still a few places. And that's what, here's another picture of the plant. So we, all three of us, Southern Environmental Law, Native Plant Society, and Naturaland Trust have been working, and with Upstate Forever too, have been working to save these plants. And this illustrates the effort. These are a collection of protected properties north of Travelers Rest. Some of you may know Arrowhead Preserve, which is in the middle. It's been there for a long time. The Nature Conservancy bought it in the 90s, eventually went to DNR. That was all there was. And then DNR went up eventually and bought this Heritage Trust Preserve called what's it called? Bellevue Spring. And then they went down and bought just a little narrow portion of Blackwell Heritage Trust Preserve. But you see the big portion there? That big portion was slated for real estate development of 100 to 200 homes. And a detention pond was going to be put in a pond that contained a large population of bunched arrowhead. In addition, that development would have impinged on the hydrology of the swamp that the bunched arrowhead is in that narrow portion because it slopes down to it. The Native Plant Society, the local community mobilized first, and then they got us all. And Southern Environmental Law Center represented the Native Plant Society, Naturaland Trust, Upstate Forever, wrote a very strong letter about why this development would be illegal. The developer, to the Planning Commission of Greenville County, the developer ultimately withdrew the plan as a result of that. DNR and we then engaged in a long negotiation with the owner and ultimately acquired that property with a grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, some money from, from Naturaland Trust, and that was protected. And we later discovered it also had population of dwarf flowered heartleaf. So I guess that has led to other acquisitions, including those in yellow. There we found some bunched arrowhead as a result of another fight against a development, which ultimately the Planning Commission rejected. That property with the bunched arrowhead was protected, and we added to it that wetland property above it. So that entire area has grown out as a result of all the efforts of Naturaland Trust, DNR, the Native Plant Society, SCLC to protect, and others to protect that chain of wetlands and rare plants. That's at the headwaters of the Inner River. That's the part in purple are the additions Naturaland Trust has worked on to add to Paris Mountain State Park. But right at the bottom is a little oddball purple stretch. That's it, growth of it. That is the headwaters of a tributary of the Reedy River. And it contains the largest population of bunched arrowhead in the Reedy River drainage. These plants only exist in the Reedy River, Inaree, and Tiger headwaters. That is protected because of Native Plant Society, SCNPS, and Naturaland Trust. Do you all know the intersection of Buncombe Road above Furman of 276 and Buncombe Road and that big apartment complex on the right? All right, that was a forest, and in it, that's where that was here. And when Bill Stringer was the president, we wrote a massive letter objecting to that development because they were going to obliterate these plants. They were going to kill them, cover it up with asphalt, and build a Target there and other things. That's what was going to happen. Well, believe it or not, they got a permit to do all that, but the permit made them do a lot of things to relocate and protect these plants. Then a recession hit. After the recession, we saw a sign go up for the development. And we checked, and they had not complied with the permit. So once again, SCLC, on behalf of the Native Plant Society, sent two pretty powerful letters about violations of the Clean Water Act and the Endangered Species Act. And ultimately, the development was approved, but they built around that well. So if you drive up there, you'll notice there's a big line of trees in the middle of this apartment complex. I don't know if you've ever noticed it. That's why they're there. They had to avoid this entire development. The target was the entire wetland. The target was rejected. New developer came in and built apartments around it rather than a shopping center on it. Those plants are there, but they were orphaned. It's an orphan parcel. We learned it was coming up for tax sale, mobilized. Ultimately, Naturaland Trust has acquired it. There's 3 populations of bunched arrowhead. And this past year, we went in there and removed some of the exotics. So those plants are now protected. Example of all of us working together. You've probably heard about this. This is Rocky Shoal spider that the Native Plant Society, we all just have loved for years. This is in McCormick County, but we started trying to figure out how to protect them. And the family that owned it, the people, not family that owned it, were fighting with each other. They had a dispute going on. There's litigation and lawsuits going on and all kinds of stuff. We watched it, worked with them throughout, ultimately prepared to buy it, but the society wasn't comfortable owning it. So Naturaland Trust acquired it with a grant from the Conservation Bank of South Carolina, which is very important. And the Native Plant Society, under the leadership of Bill Stringer and others, manages it. Except you don't manage that one plant. That one plant's on the Reedy River. And the reason that plant's on the Reedy River is Tommy White's wanted to reestablish these plants in the rivers of the Upstate. And I don't know they were ever in the Reedy River, but he got the late Joe Townsend, who was a big member of the society, and Lynn Lucas to go out. They took those seeds and planted them, and you can still see some green leaves pop up above the falls. But the spring after Tommy died, this one plant bloomed at the base of where his old law firm was, which is now the Bohemian Hotel. I don't know if the plant's still there, but it's bloomed that year. Who knows what this is? Oconee Bell. And to cut to the chase on this, we Native Plant Society, Bill Stringer was there. You may have been there. We all fought a development at Lake Jocassee, which would have hurt some bunched arrowhead. But in addition, a great person who lives nearby there, Sid Phillips, saw some property for sale and learned there were these plants along Boone's Creek. She called us out of the blue, isolated piece of property. We wondered about it, but eventually decided to jump in to protect Oconee Bell, our signature rare plant of the entire Upstate. Ultimately, we were successful with financial support from the society, made a significant grant, but again, South Carolina Conservation Bank, this time the Kiwi Toxaway Habitat Improvement Program, and Greenville Water and others supported the effort. We not only got that parcel, but we got 400 other acres. So we now have 500 acres of protected Oconee Bell habitat south of Lake Jocassee. These waters actually flow into Erie. What that is, Hexastylus naniflora, the dwarf flowered heartleaf. It is our other signature rare plant in the Upstate. It only lives in a narrow band in Greenville, Spartanburg, Cherokee counties, and a few North Carolina nearby counties, and only in a band that sort of runs between Travelers Rest. Thank you. Good, thanks. Travelers Rest and the mountain. It's not in the mountains. It's just north of Travelers Rest, and this band runs over like to Campbell. Goes out through Cherokee County. It often is around Bunched Arrowhead in Greenville County, but without Bunched Arrowhead in the other counties. Doesn't live in the wetlands, but right above them in the wet forest. It's extremely threatened by development, as you might imagine, and agriculture for that matter. And it's been on the threatened list of the Endangered Species Act since 1989. The society and its botanical experts, Jill Newberry in Spartanburg is a big expert. Chick Gaddy he's a member too. We have fought efforts to get it off the endangered species list. It's still on the endangered species list. And right now we're fighting. The society is my client. I'm the lawyer. We are fighting a proposed RV park that would be built in the middle of the habitat of this plant in Campobello. And we're going to have a hearing in Spartanburg County Court on Tuesday on that case. So we've been fighting for this plant too. Now, what does that tell you? I mean, what this tells me is we have an incredible natural heritage in our region. That's why people move here. That's why many of us stay here. It's what we think about when we're gone. That's what we welcome when we come back. But it is not going to be there unless we do. We work to protect it. That is the decision Tommy White's made. One person. And it doesn't take one person anymore. It takes an entire crowd of people, not just one. As we've been describing, all these different organizations, all these different government agencies that get created by our public officials who we have to encourage to do these things and get funded by our public officials. Now, I often make the case that this is what causes great economic development. But you can also kill the goose that lays the golden egg if you're not careful. But I really don't think that's what's important. I think what's important is that what we make a statement about who we are by whether we stand up to protect this web of life that's been entrusted to us. And not that we protect it for our own use or enjoyment, which we do, but because of the intrinsic value that is impossible really to articulate. And as Dennis Chastain said about Oconee Bell, if in 50 years we were told, people said, you had a chance to protect this and you didn't do it, who are you if you did not stand up? And one of the great things this society does is an all-volunteer group. It stands up. And we all need to stand up to protect these important places, whether it's by raising money, raising public awareness, calling our elected officials, going to public hearings, submitting written comments, or going to court if that's what we have to do. Because if those of us who are concerned about it don't stand up and take action, we'll lose it. And frankly, we are losing places every day. But through our collective work, we're saving places every day, and we can save more, and we can restore places too. So I think we all should congratulate ourselves on what we're doing, but we should also feel an incredible urgency to do more and to keep fighting and enjoy it while we're doing it. So I have to thank all of you and the people on Zoom, people who aren't here, who helped create the society, and pledge, let's all of us pledge that we have only just begun to fight. So thank you. I'll take any questions.
Zoom has questions.
Sure.
Frank, talk a little bit about the Environmental Law Center and good work that the Environmental Law Center does and how you would continue to be involved.
Right. So I have not spent my whole career there. 13 years ago, I decided to spend the last part, or one of the last parts of my career, doing good full time. I'd mostly worked in a law firm, not entirely, but mostly. So I joined the Southern Environmental Law Center 13 years ago. It was created in 1986 by a visionary like Tommy, different person, of course, because he didn't see any legal environmental arm focusing on the Southeast per se. So we work only in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee, just the southeastern states. You know, there's a lot of attention on the West, all that great stuff, New England, Florida, but this was an area he thought was being overlooked. It's the only place we work, founded in 1986. And we're not a membership-based organization like this group or say the Sierra Club or Upstate Forever. We are a legal and advocacy nonprofit, and we're sort of the legal arm of the environmental conservation movement when we really have to fight the high stakes battles in court, in the administrative agencies at a sophisticated level. Because, you know, I've been active, I was president of Friends of the Reedy River, been active in groups like this, land conservation too, all those are important. But when you get above a certain level, if we're going to fight Duke Energy and really fight them to the end over something, or we're going to fight the Department of Transportation and really fight over something to the end, not give in, we don't really have the resources to do that. SCLC does have the intellectual and financial resources to do that, and has a trained group of more than 100 attorneys in all those states. Here we have an office in Charleston and Asheville, work in the entire state of South Carolina. And it, of course, can't do every fight, but we represent Native Plant Society in numerous matters across South Carolina, Audubon Society, Catawba River Keeper, Chattooga Conservancy, Upstate Forever, sometimes just community groups. I represented that very radical environmental group called Carolina Foothills Garden Club in a battle when somebody wanted to build a building right on top, right beside the top of the falls in downtown Greenville. And we won that battle, by the way. That land was added to the park and building was rejected. So all kinds of community groups. NAACP in North Carolina, local NAACP in a coal ash fight, all kinds of groups about serious environmental problems, climate change, solar energy, PFAS contamination of our waterways, coal ash contamination, water in the rivers issues, all those big legal issues. So that when we need to go to fight in an administrative setting here mostly, but sometimes in court, as we are in the RV park, SCLC is available and it works for free. No legal fees charged to the conservation groups. It raises all its money through individual and foundation funding. No corporate money, no government money. And so it's available. Now it decides whether it's going to take a case, which one, etc., but it doesn't charge legal fees. So it's just like, you know, it's just incredible asset to protect our environment. It's part of, I always think you got to have the grassroots leg of the table. You got to have the political leg of the table, conservation voters. You got to have the land protection leg. Then you got to have the legal leg. So you have instead of a three-legged stool, I think of it as a four-legged table to be able to do all of those things to protect the environment. Because the people on the other side, they got a lot of money, they got a lot of lawyers, they got a lot of lobbyists. They're fighting to do something different.
So Dan asked, when did you become a member of the South Carolina Native Plant Society and why?
Now, Rick would know that better than me, probably. I suspect, when did the society, when was it founded?
It was founded in 1996, and I believe our first plant sale was in 1998, and you were there.
So that was probably the reason, as I was lifetime interest in the environment since I was a kid. I was a kid during when the environmental movement got started. So I was a member of the Audubon Society as a child, National Audubon Society, and then learned about all the different groups. And then when we came back here, I guess we've been living here 15 years or more. But I wanted to plant native plants, etc. And I went on, I never forget, you were probably there, I went on a field trip, Jones Gap State Park, led by that old man who used to be on TV. No, the old, prior to Rudy, that guy moved to Missouri. You remember him? He did a gardening show. You remember that guy? I forget his name, but he moved to Missouri 20 years ago. But he was on TV, and he led a trip, native plant trip to Jones Gap. And it lasted 2 or 3 hours. And I swear we didn't get more than 100 yards out of the parking lot. And nobody was bored. And you know what the great eye-opener to me is, you just go out into the wild and you just see the landscape or the mass. Well, he was dissecting them. He was saying, look at this one little thing here. What is that? You know, and describing it so that instead of being a blur of a landscape, it became a very specific natural reality of little parts. That was a genius of what he did. And of course, that happened with Rudy and Patrick and other great naturalists. But I remember that Dan's great field trip leader. That was the first field trip he did. It's a great eye-opener. So that's how I got here.
Okay. Of course, you questions, but trade off. Think on your questions. Have there been any instances where environmental groups have partnered with a large company like Duke Energy to do something positive?
Oh, yes. Let me see if I can think of the best best example. Now, sometimes we buy property from them. That would be an example. And sometimes they'll have species on sites they own that they will help preserve. And sometimes too, you know, corporate entities want to be involved in some kind of project to improve their green credentials. But I give you the most surprising one recently. Native Plant Society got a call from a quarry company. And this is a rock quarry. You would think of that as a native plant friendly group, or even be thinking about native plants, but they've been acquired by a German entity. it is concerned about the green, the environmental consequences of what they do. And it's hired a full-time environmental staff person with a PhD to help them achieve these goals. And one thing she was looking at is how do we deal with the overburden and how do we bring more native plants into our sediment and landscape control effort after we remove the, create this overburden after digging out granite. And so Bill Stringer and I went up there. And I went up there sort of as the project guy. Bill is the person who knew something. And Bill had very good recommendation. He said, well, do you have a place where overburden's been here? I said, yes. Said, well, let's go look and see what grew on it. That might tell us what to plant. And it's covered in Virginia pine, which is just grew in. But first there were grasses established a place, and then the pines started popping up after that. So he's making a recommendation to them about the sort of native plant seed and where you can get it to now be included in their sediment, I guess you'd call sediment control, because that overburden was just raw at first. But we could see other areas that hadn't, Virginia pine hadn't come up, but they were covered with a lot of native grasses, forbs, and things that had just sort of come up. That's an example.
What areas considered for purchase by the Naturaland and other groups? And we were talking about.
Okay, the question is, what other areas are being considered for acquisition? And I would say, for us, we realize we only purchase from willing sellers. So somebody either it's got to be on the market or want to sell. So in general, so you can't have a perfect strategic plan. Okay, you have to be opportunistic. So I would say in general, what we look for are properties near the national forest that the national forest would like to incorporate into it. That's in Oconee. Properties near or adjacent to state parks, heritage trust sites, heritage preserve sites, or DNR management areas. Properties that have rare species on them. Properties along Highway 11. I mean, it's all the things we've worked on in the past. And any other good thing you can suggest that might come up. There might be a way to fund it, because we've always, it's not like we can just go buy anything we want to. I mean, we'd have to have a $10 billion organization to do that. So we have to always be thinking of possible funding streams. And is there a way we can advance funding or borrow it as long as we know we're going to recoup it later within a limit? Even that's not limitless. But so we can play that role, but we also have to envision how to finance the acquisition of it ultimately. So part of it depends on what the various agencies are. For example, state parks are often interested in expanding the state parks. So as a forest service in certain areas, forests, a lot depends on where the funding opportunities are, but generally we're trying to build on that great, Tommy Watts had a concept of the blue wall, the Blue Ridge Escarpment, trying to build on that in special places in the Piedmont. So that's generally what we try to do. On the major rivers, we're looking at the northern Saluda rivers. Those are headwaters for drinking water. So those kind of areas. But we're open for other suggestions, but we can't do everything. There's funding sources.
Anything specific in the works? I think she wanted to know.
Well, the specific thing I told you was what was acquired last night. I mean, this afternoon. So that's 1,100 acres. That is specific. And I showed on the screen, if you saw, we just acquired that additional property on Highway 25 that provides greater Oh, I can tell you one other thing too, greater wetland protection for that network. We also have acquired, and eventually it's going to become a heritage trust site. If you know the North Saluda River, where it comes out of the Poinsett Reservoir and the Greenville watershed is up there. We've acquired a mountain, Cedar Mountain, that overlooks the North Saluda. And by the way, DNR's is going to be a heritage preserve in part because they discovered some very rare plants up there in the Gradenic outcrop. And they found a milk snake, which is rarely seen in South Carolina. Milk snake. I understand, I'm not a herpetologist, but I understand it's unusual in South Carolina. This is a great natural area. We've acquired that as well as the bottomlands along the river. And there's a growing effort to try to create a new trout fishery in South Carolina in the North Saluda as it comes out of the Poinsett Reservoir. It won't go all the way down the North Saluda, just in the top area because the water will be cold enough there. So that area in there is being protected. It's an emerging protected area that had not really been a protected area. Yes.
How did the strategy change? You look closer, like county, like city, like municipality. The trust ever been interested in acquiring things that are closer down?
Yes. For example, you know, the cancer survivor. Oh, the question is a trust, how do strategies change when you get within towns? And have we ever been interested in protecting sites within municipalities or near them? The answer is yes. First of all, remember Paris Mountain State Park is really almost an urban park now. So that's an illustration, but closer, more directly to answer your question, do you know the Cancer Survivors Park in Greenville? Well, that's there because of Naturaland Trust. We own the site of the Cancer Survivor, half of the site of the Cancer Survivors Park. We own area between Cleveland Street and Church Street, and we own the Reed River there and the trail. And then the site on Cleveland Street where the building is owned by Rewab. We owned all the park area, I guess you'd say. And we acquired that because it came up for sale. It was Furman University, my school, where I went to school, my alma mater, put it up for sale. It was the last remaining portion of the old Furman campus, still owned by the university in the city of Greenville. And by the way, that trail that went through there, it was not a permanent trail. It was a temporary trail. So that trail could have been ripped out of there. So it was up for sale. This was when Tommy was alive. And I went with him. We talked with him. He's got some beautiful, one of our board members loved the Carolina Silver Bells up the back there. And he went in there and negotiated with somebody who got a contract to be part of it, with Furman. And under his leadership, Naturaland Trust bought it. And then we killed the kudzu that was suffocating the trees. And there was a billboard on that side. I don't know if you remember that. There was a main billboard coming into Greenville was on that property. And after we bought it, it paid not a non-insignificant amount of money to have that billboard there. But the lease ran out right after we bought it. Somebody told to take the billboard down. That's why there's no billboard there. Naturaland Trust got rid of the billboard. Gave up a lot of money to do that. And so we held it. But we're not a property manager. The city at that time was not interested in adding it to the park. By the way, the lease for the trail ran out after we bought it. It was temporary. We gave the city a permanent lease. This was before the Swamp Rabbit Trail had been created as a concept. So anyway, where they were going to put the Cancer Survivors Park, the property owner kicked them off. And they had no place to go in the city. It came to us. Believe it or not, we let them go in there for free. And have you ever walked the boardwalk down there? You know how weird it is? That's because of us. Because we said you can't cut any trees. You can build a boardwalk, but you can't cut the trees. And so that's why it's a jiggy jaggy, which I think makes it more interesting. And if you may have noticed, where the building is, they got a lot of exotic plants, bloomers. On our side, they can only plant natives. That's in the conservation easement. It's got a conservation easement on it. We put an easement on it, help out state fair, but that's one example. Another example is we bought, if you've been on the Swamp Rabbit Trail behind the YMCA Greenville, there's a bridge over the Reedy River. We own that parcel, so we gave the bridge, area for the bridge. And we also donated the easement to allow it to be Nickeltown to be connected. That Baxter Street connectors on our property. We bought that 7 acres there years ago before there was any trail, thinking if there's ever going to be what we call the Greenway, then this would be an anchored piece. And we have helped by other portions, several miles of the Swamp Rabbit Trail, and also helping right now, if it works out, to try to get a parcel that would be key to it going in the Fountain Indians. So, and we own the little parcel, you know where Linky Stone Park is. You know where, it's where the Swamp Rabbit Trail really begins in the city of Greenville, begins under that bridge and heads out. We own that green space on the right. And people used to park on it and created a mud hole. If I remember that. So we stopped them parking on it. Now we have an agreement with the city, a memorandum of understanding, and we have that open area there. And we have that first part of the trail. So we're open to those. Of course, the challenge is now, as you might imagine, is the property so expensive. And it's hard to convince a conservation funder to pay $1 million for an acre here when we could get 300, 250 acres of an important ecological site somewhere else. But we have helped to play that role when we can. We've helped the city parks actually acquire another parcel that we held for a while. They needed an intermediate owner. We've done that, and we're open to doing that kind of thing for others too. By the way, Stump House Mountain now, the area we help to protect, Upstate Fairburn holds the easement, but that's where Walhalla has that mountain biking thing. That was going to be a gated development. So we're open to those, and we try to, but it's always a chat. We own some other parcels along the Reedy River, for example. So
as far as like when you can closer to the footer of the mountain, you can see that land, like you said, the Forest Service, and they're willing to buy that state park. So how does it work more in the metropolitan area, like where you're?
Well, Emma, so far nobody's bought it from us. I mean, that would be very helpful. And we could have that funding to do other things. Now, there have been an instance, like, as I said, we did buy one parcel and held it for the city for a while, and then they compensated us and they incorporated into that park near Unity Park, that area. One piece, I don't mean the whole thing, but part of it. So it just depends on the individual transaction, or if we can get some kind of funding. But occasionally we have just bought stuff and held it, or somebody occasionally now, by the way, occasionally sometimes people give us property because they want it protected forever. And we've had some very philanthropic people do that because they're very committed to protecting the property and have donated it to us. And we take that very seriously. We're either going to be the stewards of it forever, depending upon their wishes, protect it, or we'll ultimately get it to a state park or a DNR or the Forest Service or some other appropriate public agency for long-term conservation, depending upon what the individual wants to do.
Yeah, you mentioned the milk snake, and you also mentioned the trout. Are there any other animals that do you get involved in protecting animals?
Yeah, well, we protect so many, well, some people may not like this, but the bear population of Paris Mountain lives on our stays on our property. Now, they may go out, and they visit people. They also live on the park. But yeah, the face of Paris Mountain overlooking Furman, we own that. A lot of it. We've acquired a lot of it, or now conveyed it some to the state park. And there's a bear population that lives there that comes down to that golf course at night. So yes, but I cannot point right now to any rare animal. Now you can imagine on these thousands and thousands of acres, there are lots of animals. But I mean, just to give you an example, we've looked at the idea of trying to acquire habitat of the swamp rabbit. You know, there is an animal called the swamp rabbit, and there's habitat for it. For example, it's not there anymore, but you know where Patrick Square is, there were swamp rabbits there at one time. They exist. I've seen one with a DNR person once, and so they do exist, but they are a declining. They're not an endangered species yet, but they're declining species because they live in this wetland kind of areas that over time can get converted to agriculture, development, get impacted in different ways. So I actually spent some time talking to a Clemson professor who's researching them and letting him know if he finds an area of habitat that is not already on public or protected lands, keep us in mind. Now, I have to say, I thought we could probably raise money for something called swamp rabbit. And that would be a way to do conservation, protect an animal, and find a way to raise money. So we've always got to have that financial idea. But if we had a rare animal, we have had, by the way, elk on Naturaland Trust property. Do you know that? In Greenville County. I don't know how often they're there, but there was a lot of publicity about one elk showed up in northern Greenville County about 4 years ago. They came on that's where it came, on Naturaland Trust property. Ultimately, and then went to other people's property too. DNR captured that and took it down to that site, Tricentennial Park, down near the coast. I suspect if that one elk came every year, I suspect. I've often wondered if we don't have a stray elk showing up every now and then. We do have, by the way, I should have said this, we do have some rare bats. We've done bat surveys, and we have the tricolored bat, which is up for listing as an endangered species. We found tricolored bat on our property. And we're open to protecting property for bats too, if we can find them and then make the case for it to the funders that we're protecting the bats. You may have seen a new endangered species was the gray bat was spotted in Oconee and found in Oconee and Greenville counties. I don't know where that is, but if it's not on protected land, we'd be open to try and protect the habitat for the rare endangered gray bat too in our region. So if you find something, let us know. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you for all you do. The society has contributed financially to what Naturaland Trust has done. It has been an advocate and a litigant in things that SELC has been involved in, and also I think what South Carolina Environmental Law Project's been involved in. Submitted comments, gone to public hearings. So this is a really powerful, effective, all volunteer organization. So thank the society for everything it does. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate that. It's very impressive and inspiring, I tell you. I could listen to the history for days. Anyway, thanks everybody for coming. Be sure to help yourself to some refreshments on the way out. And hopefully we'll see you on December 12th at our holiday party. See you then. Thank you.